Hi, friends. Welcome to Show Talks at the Fifth Avenue Theater. My name is Brodrick Ryans. My pronouns are he, him. I am joined by the lovely Nicholas Bernard. Nicholas, please introduce yourself to the kiddos.
My name is Nicholas Japaul Bernard. I am a Seattle-based actor of about 6-7 years now. I want to say pronouns are he, him, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. I'm also excited to be the guest host of this talk.
Look at you.
Let's dive right into it.
Come on.
Tell us about you.
Hello there. My name is Nicholas Japaul Bernard. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a Seattle-based theater artist, freelance, jumping from stage to stage as the Lord sees fit.
You're working, and we see it. We
trying, baby. We trying.
And we're trying to celebrate that completely. So, just with that, let's just hop right into it, Nicholas. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, anything else that you want to share about you. But I would also love for you to tell us about this character, Ferris, that you're playing in Choir Boy, which is a joint production between the ACT Theater and Fifth Avenue Theater.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, me as an artist, one thing I'm like, that's very important to me is making sure, just being able to eventually, as I amass influence to be able to try and make more spaces for Black, queer, and specifically disabled artists to tell their stories, but also being very clear that it's not just that, don't just call on us when you have your Black play or that play about somebody, we can do it all. We've been doing it all. There's something to be said about people who go through most of their lives pretending to be something they're not. If that's not range, I don't know what is. Truly. And that's something specifically with Ferris that I think I really connect with. On some level, and we talk a lot when we're doing more specifically just Black things that don't have necessarily a queer lens on it. We always talk about this idea of code switching. That when you add queerness on top of that, there's an extra layer. So now not only can I not let these people know that I'm Black, even though they can see it, but I now have to let these people think that I'm straight. And that tug of war that's always happening is something that I really, as the kid who went to Catholic school for 12 years of all pre-undergrad schooling was private school. So reading about Ferris and seeing him in this uniform, making these choices, trying to run shit as best as he can, not because he wants to run everything, but because there's a necessity for excellence when you're Black, and even a greater necessity for being exceptional when you're Black and queer.
Yeah, thank you for that. I feel that and understand that completely. Thank you. Really, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. So with that, can you talk about the similarities as you as a person, and the similarities between this character and how you kind of merge those two identities together to actually be able to portray this role? What parts of you are you bringing into that space? And then do you find that there are moments where maybe you're actually taking Ferris home?
So I know two sides to this question. So first half, in terms of relation to Ferris, obviously being Black, obviously being gay, like I said before, going to private school in high school, and honestly before that, but high school specifically, because Ferris is 17. But the thing with Ferris that really gets me is that, being queer growing up, we don't realize this is a defense mechanism, but being grown having that air. There's a reason why a lot of queer kids get the "you've been here before" like look from like adults and stuff. Um, and watching Ferris navigate what he believes it means to act like an adult, to have to be the adult in the situation. You know, we're always like, you when you're getting bullied, it's not the bully who gets in trouble, it's the person who hit him back. And you need to, what did Michelle Obama say? When they go low, we go high. I have issue with that, and I'll talk to her about that someday. But when they say that idea, of like having to rise above, and watching Ferris take that idea and take it to its nth degree, rising above in grades, rising above in extracurriculars, rising above in being an adult, and watching him try on the skin of being an adult, and how weaponizing that ability, that a lot of young queer kids have, weaponizing that ability both helps him in some cases, and in other cases definitely holds him back. In terms of taking him home with me as an actor, I definitely find that because my background is originally in dance, my gateway into acting isn't necessarily as heady and emotion, memory, whatever you want to call it, based. It's way more physical. So I've never been one to take emotional things home with me, or like that kind of weight home with me in a character, but I do find that things will live in my body. Holding my body a certain way, having to do certain gestures. So like I'll find myself, you know, fully being me and cognizant of me, and not like, you know, getting my wires crossed with Ferris's necessarily in terms of how I may feel about things in my everyday life. But I'll notice I may speak like him sometimes. It'll come out of my mouth. Even though like we kind of speak very similarly, something about Terrell's writing that is so exceptional. But it is very, once you honor what he's writing in terms of like punctuation and where he capitalizes things, where there are line breaks, and you honor that, you start to hear the poetry, and it's literally just like, oh, this is how little Black gay boys speak. This is what it is. There's a line in one of the scenes where I'm talking to another character, and I ask him about how his summer is, and I say, "You bag you a honey, you bag you a honey, or whatever you homies in Willacoochee call it." Now, when I say sterilized like that, it don't sound like nothing. But then when you put on the that spice of being a Black queer, it's like you bag you a honey, you bag you a honey, or whatever you homies in Willacoochee call it. Like it's all of that. It's very clearly a boy who grew up not only emulating his the Black women in his life, but also Black women like Trina and like Lil Kim and like all these girls who like gave us these paintbrushes to paint our language with.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm very curious to know, Nicholas, are there moments then, any other specific moments in the show that you can think of where you're like, I'm gonna go home and this moment might live in my head rent free, or within my body rent free for like the next 5 hours?
There is I don't want to give away too much. There's a scene towards the end of the play. How do I say this? There's a scene towards the end of a play where Ferris tells a particular story about his childhood, that is, with the exception of the setting, is basically like line for line something that happened to me as a child. And that was a lot for me to read the first time I touched the play. It doesn't like, again, since my acting arrives in my body before it arrives in my head, it isn't so much, it isn't so much that like I'm going to that place when I will be doing the scene and pulling from that, but more so that will elicit that out of me if I'm not careful about it. So I guess my acting journey definitely isn't so much about like trying to keep myself from bringing that stuff home, but it's more so trying to keep the text from bringing things up in me that I don't want it to bring up.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you. Which actually leads me to the next question that I wanted to ask, which is what's kind of been the hardest thing in terms of preparing for this role that you've had to face? And
Hmm.
what's been one of the most rewarding things that you've had come up in the process of being like, I'm preparing for this role, I'm creating this character. The character has already been created before by other folks, but you're adding your own spin and your own spice to that.
Hmm.
So like, what's been the hardest part in the preparation process, and what's been the most rewarding? Um, and also, like, what parts of Terrell's writing do you think that you're just like, it's this, like, this is what really needs to show up in the room when we do this?
Hmm. The hardest part for me is actually like in general the hardest part for me in any show that I do. As I stated earlier, I'm very interested in creating and maintaining and inspiring spaces for Black, queer, disabled people specifically, to
Mm-hmm.
just being like I really would, because that specific demographic doesn't get a lot of time, really any time really, to shine in a theater space, whether that be experienced through text or just showing up in a space. It's not lost on me that when I find myself in these rooms, like at the Fifth Avenue Theater or ACT or the Rep earlier this year, that like the I'm I'm an anomaly. Like I can't, like if we went through and we looked, and again there are people with invisible disabilities that we don't know about, but if we looked through and thought about what Black, queer, visibly disabled people who have like disabilities that show up in the world that cannot be, um like when someone is in a wheelchair but you don't know when someone has chronic pain, like that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are how many of those have you seen? How many of those have you hired? How many of those like continue to do work? And we're out there, but it doesn't, so it's not lost on me that like that's not a thing that happens a lot. But with that, the hardest part for me in any process, and specifically with this one more so with like the movement that we're doing, like the choreography and such, because there is a good amount of dancing in this show. It's not a musical, it's a play with music, but there is a good amount of dancing. um is that physical work, because I have some paralysis in my lower legs. I have what is called a bilateral drop foot, and I have to wear AFO braces to keep my legs at a 90-degree angle so that I have a more normal gait pattern when I walk. And that
Mm-hmm.
and the reason why that is so hard is not just simply because, like, oh, I'm disabled and I need to, well, not simply. It's not only that I am disabled and I am unable to do certain things. It also comes from the fact that before I dove headfirst into acting, I was working towards being more of a concert dancer. So when we're doing this choreo, there's those extra layer of, yes, I cannot do this right now, or I cannot do this way. But 6, 7 years ago, I not only could have done this way, but you probably would have had to have made it harder for me. So it's very difficult to go from like busting out 10 pirouettes without thinking about it to barely being able to balance on one foot, and negotiating that in every show,
Mm-hmm.
specifically plays with music or more so musical theater. There's always a moment, that first choreography rehearsal, where like I have to excuse myself and like go sob in the bathroom, not because this stuff is too much, but in that same way I was talking about, I have to work to make sure that the text doesn't elicit
Wow.
certain things out of me. Moving in that way just automatically elicits things out of me that I may or may not want to come out in that moment. Usually not, because they act in a lot of theaters since coming back have been ACT, as well as some other theaters, have all been very good about um, allowing us as humans to show up in the room, with all of our scars and things. But even
Mm-hmm.
even still, even though that is the case, and I'm grateful, as well as many other people are grateful for that opportunity, does not necessarily mean you want that stuff to come up in the room.
Yeah.
It's great that you're
Yes.
making space for it, but I don't want it to. So that's really the hardest thing for me so far has been, we just started doing intensive choreography, and of course I had that moment, and it wells up all the time. It happened during Beauty and the Beast. It happened during Annie. It happened during Rocket. Like no matter what, if there's dancing involved, this is
Yeah.
just something that I have to deal with. That's usually the hardest part for me, and it's been that for this show as well. The most rewarding thing I'm getting from prepping from Ferris is really just like, for the first time in a while, actually the first time ever, I will say that the character that has represented me this well. That I am truly seeing myself in this character in a way that I have not before. I've had other like I did Hedwig and the Angry Inch when I first moved here, and before that was the other time where, like, even though I was not going through those specific things, there were large swaths of the character that I was like, oh, yep, absolutely, this is that. Oh, just going down the laundry list of things that felt like they were coming from me, and not that I was imbuing them into the text. So I think that's not even, I think that definitely has been the most rewarding part of getting to crack open Ferris. Yes, the specific part of Ferris that I really want to honor in Terrell's text is how smart he is. Something that we really want to, that we're trying to explore in the room, is something else that is also very much in the text, is this conversation about how young Black children are often looked at as if they are older than what they are. That's how, among many reasons, that's how we end up with like 13-year-olds getting shot dead by police officers. You know, like, I was afraid of him. He was only 13, because they see us as adults. They don't see us as children when we're children, if they see us as people at all.
Yeah.
But even still within that, understanding that Ferris is a child and he's a teenager, he's still so much smarter than every other teenager that's in that room. He's so much further along in development than every teenager in that room. Because again, when you're queer and you have to grow up putting on an extra mask to, like, keep people from clocking you, having to do that, you have to come to a realization to see that when I'm a child looking at an adult, they do not see me as thus. They see me as if they're homophobic, they see me as a little fag, or they see me as a grown man because I'm Black. So you already know that that's how they look at you. And so what is it? And so there's something about Ferris where you don't go through your life pretending to be something that you're not, and not have the ability to weaponize your personality, your essence.
Yeah.
You know, when Ferris says things, he knows exactly what he's saying. He may not see the ramifications on the other end of that. He's definitely not grown enough or an adult enough to see that you should not say certain things the way that you say them. Finding that balance, because I am a 31-year-old person playing a 17-year-old boy. So it's difficult to ride that line and not just look like an adult who's up there talking to another adult. So I'm really trying to, like, figure out what that looks like, because I think Ferris is so much more than just like just this, like, not even meek, but just like flower of a boy who's just who's like, he's ignorant to things, but he doesn't think he's ignorant to things, and that's what I want to push through. I don't want the tell to be he doesn't know what's going on. I want the audience to follow him along and think that he knows exactly what he's doing. But because Terrell's a genius, the parameters of the play do not allow for you to leave the play thinking that, yeah, he knows exactly what's going on.
Yeah, it just seems like there's so many different dynamic struggles happening for this character. I can't, that fascinates me and it excites me. I can't wait. I cannot wait to see that.